Good morning, good evening. Just want to discuss a few issues relevant to Pesach this year. The first issue that I'd like to discuss is the issue of the hand gel that people are using in order to get rid of the bacteria on their hands. And that gel has with it two different questions which I'd like to discuss. Then we're going to discuss some other issues of Shabbos which we had this year. That gel, and in my house we actually have more than one bottle of it. So I would like to make a statement. I'm not talking about all of them. But in general, it's called a gel because it's a gel. A gel means that it's not a liquid. If it's not a liquid, even though for liquid, things that are not a liquid, there's an isser to smear them on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So being that that's the case, it would be also for a person to smear that on their hand. These gels have the nature that if they sit on your hand for even a small amount of time, they start to melt, and then that problem wouldn't exist. Being that that's so, if somebody would like to use this gel on Shabbos or Yom Tov, my suggestion is you keep it near your plata or something like that, where the temperature is warmer, and then it will be a liquid the whole time, and you don't have to worry about the shiloh altogether. Just make it from a gel to a non-gel, and then the whole issue is taken care of. That's as far as the gel is concerned, as far as the memareach aspect. There's another aspect of the gel, which has to do with the alcohol content that it has. Though I would assume that most of the alcohol that's used is not what we would call readily edible. There are different kinds of alcohols that are used in all different kinds of items. And I'll share with you something which I heard from someone from the shul, a fascinating thing. His brother told him as follows. He was in whatever city it was, I don't remember where it was, and there was some fellow who wanted to, a guy who's a panhandler on the street, wanted some money for him, and he said, I'm not going to use it for booze, I'm just going to use it for food. So he told the fellow, he said, okay, I'll give you the money either way, but tell me the truth, what are you really going to do with the money that I give you? So what he said was, I'm going to take it, I'm going to go to the drugstore and buy hairspray, and I spray this onto the coffee filter of my coffee machine, and when I pour the hot water on it, the hot water distills the alcohol in it. He says that stuff that comes out of there can make you really, really high. Okay? Now this idea, this is obviously a chemical change, and this fellow didn't really understand what's going on. Whether you need a chemical change or a physical change, Moshe Feinstein writes in a tshuva in Orchaim Chelegimos in the Samach Aleph that if it's something that's easily changeable back to a edible form, so then one should consider it still like it's Chometz. And what this is actually in America, this is a common issue that there are alcohols that are used in all different kinds of products, and they're called denatured. Denatured means that they have a alcohol that's a edible alcohol. Being that's an edible alcohol, the government would tax them for bringing it in or out of the country. So what they do is they put poison into it to make it inedible, and therefore it circumvents the tax. However, that process that's done many times can be reversed. And being that that's the case, so there's a question whether those alcohols are problematic on Pesach. This is relevant not only to perfumes and to many items, deodorants. There's sometimes these kind of alcohols. Some alcohols don't have any problem at all, some do. But this is an issue which one would have to know what would be the halacha in regard to these gels on Pesach. Do they need a kosher Pesach supervision for them or not? So I will say that I saw some that actually had a kosher Pesach supervision, some that didn't. However, my assumption is this year, if a person would be in a situation that they need it. Now, someone would say, so what's called that you need it? Many times there are people who all the time are going in and out of, we'll just use the word danger zones. It's not clear exactly what's going on where they are, and they have to all the time be washing their hands, and putting on and off gloves is just not practical. So that's called they need it. A person will be in that kind of a situation. The daiti vada, you could be saimach on the mekilim because I didn't try it, but I assume that alcohol gel is not tasty. I don't think anybody was going to be taking it in order to eat it. So even though it may be that it's possible to somehow rearrange it that it should be edible, but halacha l'maisa, if a person can't get a hold of the other stuff and he needs it, I'll use the word leave it, needing it to your discretion. What does that mean? The daiti one body can be meko and use it on Pesach. But again, if you have the opportunity to get it with the hechsher, the daiti, that's what should be done. I had a question from the Kehila this year, and I'd like to share it with you because it's actually a fascinating question, which probably should even be discussed like on a Shabbos Hagadol Shir. We've had similar questions that were discussed in a public forum, but this one is a little bit different. Somebody ordered online a medicine from Super Farm, and it came on Erev Pesach after Zman Isser, before Chatzos. Now, the item which he ordered was an item that it has at least suffic chometz in it. It has some kind of a chometz derivative in it. And he called me up. He said, what do I have to do? Do I have to burn it? What do I have to do? Throw it, flush it down the toilet? So I called up somebody who was an expert in this field. And he said, yeah, it's vadai suffic chometz. Got that? It's vadai suffic chometz. So that's like a nice Jewish answer. Vadai suffic chometz. And so what do you do with it? So I told the guy, I said, put it away. Now, the reason why this is vadai suffic chometz, and this is important because many times different medications, people assume that in medications, one can be lenient. When you're speaking about, as in this situation it was a child's medication, many times the chometz is actually in the syrup or something that's the spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. It's not part of the medicinal part. It's actually the part that gets the medicine down, which is 100% food, and therefore that's not something that should be eaten at all. So in those situations, vada, there's room to be, I should say with machmer, probably you'd have to hold that it would be aser. However, and I think this is true in this situation, I'm not going to get involved with what medicine it was, there's a fascinating idea, which in my shiurim I've spoken about it many times, but a fascinating idea which revolves a suffix which is discussed in Taf Mem Ches and Shulchan Aruch, discussed a few places throughout Shas. Before I even tell you about what I'm going to tell you about, I'm going to tell you there's a Korban Nesanel in Psachim, I think in the third or fourth paragraph, I don't remember exactly where it is, where he discusses the sweat on the walls in rooms that have what's called the Gesher Kol Chom. There's a differential between the inside and outside in the walls of sweat. So there's a question whether that vapor, that water, that condensation has the din of water in order to be machmitz wheat. And then what happened here that Korban Nesanel discusses that there were sacks of wheat which were leaning against the wall. The wall perspired and the water went into the sacks. And the question is, what is the status of the grain that's in those stacks? And the lights of Korban Nesanel there is machmer, although there's a little bit of a discussion about it, whether that what we call water, but that water which came from nowhere, obviously we understand it didn't come from nowhere, but that water which came from nowhere, what's its halachic status? So here we see a classical thing, that not everything that we know what it is has the halachic value to it like we would imagine that it would be. The way that whiskey is made, it's distilled. What does the word distilling mean? What happens is that they take whatever it is that they're cooking, and the vapor goes up, and there's like a beaker that's on a slant that goes down, and it catches the vapor and drops it off somewhere else. And what actually happened is that you'll have something that came from nowhere. No, there's a question of Basar B'Cholam. There's a question actually nowadays in industrial kashrus. This is a very, very central question about things which turn into vapor if they lose their status of being that where they came from. Being that this is the Pnei Yeshua Azokim means the Pnei Yeshua's grandfather, who he was a great Pesach. He was noted that the chometz of schnapps is not chometz d'oraisa at all, because it's made from distilled hops or distilled grain, scotch, whatever it is, and therefore it's not chometz d'oraisa, it's only chometz d'Rabbanan. Because of that, there are many people that though there are many of those people that are makbid not to sell chometz gomer, and yet they sell schnapps. This, I just want to make this clear, this is schnapps. We're not talking about beer. Beer and schnapps are not made the same way. Beer is chometz gomer, that's just cooked stuff, and schnapps is distilled, and because it's distilled, so it could very well be that midrais it's not chometz, and therefore there are those that are makel and they sell their schnapps. I actually had a question this year about somebody who, because of this year, didn't want to go out, didn't want to go and sell their chometz with the Rav, so they just got rid of all their chometz. And after Zmani Suroi, before Chatzos, again, I got a phone call that this guy remembered that he has a schnapps collection. Now, I don't have to tell you, a schnapps collection, I don't know what the average value of a schnapps collection is, but I was told that it was an expensive schnapps collection. So I guess it's over $50. Let's just leave it at that. Okay? And he wanted to know what to do with his schnapps. I sent the person to somebody else. I didn't answer that question. Maybe some other year we'll discuss that question in depth. But this is something which is very important. A person has to make sure that the medications that he has, all of these things that could have chometz in them, they should be gotten rid of. Another nikuda, there are many times that there are people have, for medicinal reasons, that they have to take medications that are chometz. And there's an arrangement made. I sell my chometz to the Edacharedis, and I've been there by the Mechira. They, every year, they have it on their contract with the guy that if there's a need for medicinal reasons, the guy will allow people to take their chometz. So what should be done is very important. If a person has to take medication on Shabbos, then again, I'm stressing the medication is the question of chometz. I'm not talking about things like the syrup to help the medicine go down. The medication is some kind of a binder in there that's not there to eat, and it's not really edible. And the word edible, I just want to make this clear. If a person would take rocks and grind them up and eat them, nothing will happen to him. But that doesn't make them edible. Edible means that a person derives nutritional benefit from it. So probably if we would take grass and chew it and swallow it, it would also be edible. It would come in and go out, but it wouldn't give us anything besides a little bit of trouble on the way. Again, so a person has to take some kind of item that is a question of, on the chometz issue. Again, a Rav should be spoken to about each item individually. What should be done is that it should be sold together with the chometz. And when he needs to take it, so then he takes it from the guy. Because by doing so, there's no reason why a person has to own chometz. There's no pekuach nefesh to own the chometz all of Pesach. So here's the convenient way to work it out, that there's already a deal made up with the guy that you should be able to get your chometz or questionable chometz on Pesach. And again, anybody who has these questions, they should speak to Rav. I'll just mention one of the issues of the foods that are, these kind of medications that are problematic are things like Ritilin, that they have actually chometz in them. Anybody who has those issues should really speak to a Rav as to how to deal with them when they're necessary. I just end off with a joke. There was a kid who had to take Ritalin every day, and the Rebbe used to send him out to get a drink in the middle of the class, and that's why he used to take his Ritalin without anybody knowing about it. And one day the Rebbe said, "Wow, the kid was so good." So I told the parents the kid was so good. So the kid came home. The father asked him, "Why were you so good today?" He said, "Very simply, today I put the Ritalin in the Rebbe's coffee." And the Rebbe's one who took the Ritalin instead of me. But anyways, a person has to know at the end of the day when it's really necessary for a person to take these things. And if a person has this kind of a question, you should speak to it all. All right, have a good night and a good Yantif. Thank you all for joining me. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. We're on at 4 o'clock, I think, Erev Yantif, Mitzvah Shem. Looking forward to seeing you. 4. Okay, have a good Yom Tov. Bye-bye.